Hello, everyone, and welcome to another great episode of the Jason Howell Company Speaker Series Zoominars. My name is Jason Howell, and with us today is Christopher Holtby, co-founder of Wealth Advisors Trust Company. Now, what I love about Chris is his passion and interest in the trust administration business. I know it's a passion all of you share. We'll be talking with him about a lot of topics, especially, can you trust your trustee? He'll help us answer that question. But before we get to all of that, let's just meet Christopher. Christopher, welcome to the Zoominar. How has your day been so far?
Pretty good. I started this morning with my class on American literature and the Gilded Age, so I am steeped in learning. So let's go.
You're steeped in learning, and hopefully you'll be steeped in teaching here today. We're really happy to have you, someone that's in a topic that a lot of people don't tend to think about. And so this will be pretty fun. Letting a few folks in here. Okay. And has it the rest of your day? Is it going to end up being pretty busy, or is this going to be sort of the slide into the summer of the end of the week here, maybe vacation?
No, I took 10 days off looking at the ocean, doing nothing for 10 days. So I'm now in full throttle for the next 6 months. So
Excellent. Well, we're happy to have you in full throttle. I think most of the folks who are here early are going to be here early, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And if you came to Can You Trust Your Trustee? You came to the right Zoominar. Christopher, once again, we're really happy to have you here. And I'm looking forward to just the discussion that we're going to have on this topic. Can you trust your trustee? Before we do that, just a word from our sponsor. So our sponsor today is the Jason Howell Company. We're a family wealth management firm specializing in sustainable investing and family governance. We're able to compete with some of the most well-known private bank and wealth advisors by forming a virtual family office with a team of experts and specialists. Experts like Christopher Holtby. We're based in Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., but we serve clients nationwide. For more about Jason Howell Company, just go to jasonhowell.com. And now, on to our show. So, Christopher, you are one of the people that gave me one of the most sparse backgrounds and bios that I've received in a long time, notwithstanding the fact that you have some of the best experience, not only in this area of expertise, but in wealth management in general. So for an example, you do have May department stores on here, but you also have Ernst & Young on here. Not a lot of people realize that now the Big Four, used to be Big 12 or what have you, but not a lot of people realize that the large accounting firms used to be in this wealth advisory space. Tell us a little bit about your experience of that.
So really all it did is it took the best parts of wealth management or family office, tax, investments, on the estate planning, legacy planning side, and everyone was the smartest that it gets. I mean, dumb people can't work at Ernst & Young. So you've got a team of people where everyone is over and above achiever,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's just driving the best answers, the best questions. And it's the questions that drive the better answers. And it's constantly wondering, why are we doing it this way? And that's what the Big Four are, people that work in that environment. Everyone's smart. That's just to get in. That's the ante. But it's the creative problem solving. That's the intoxicating part about working at a firm like that.
Now, did you leave Ernst & Young and go to Legg Mason, or was it the other way around?
It was the other way around. I was
Okay.
hired.
Okay.
But, look, trustee services goes back to the 13th century,
Yeah.
sometimes around the end of the Second Crusades. And then the American founding fathers adopted the British version. And then states were allowed to have control over trust law. And certain states took a more opportunistic approach to making trust law really modern. It started with Delaware, and then it moved to South Dakota and Nevada, and then it expanded into Alaska, New Hampshire, and Tennessee. And so really any state can have great trust law. It's really based upon the state legislators.
Christopher, what I appreciate so much about you is that you are actually interested in your profession in a way that comes out because some of what you shared just now is actually in your peer-reviewed paper, an advisor roadmap to the corporate trustee industry. I read it. It was interesting. It was put out by, I guess it used to be called the IWI Institute. I guess back when you had a certified private wealth advisor designation.
I still have it.
Okay.
I mean, you go to school, you might as well keep it, but
May
it's
as
not
well.
really a big deal. I just assume everyone wants to stay educated, so that's why I don't make a big deal about it.
Well, and that's why we appreciate having you because the more you write about it, you obviously have a history background, you care about the history of things, and that just makes you a great teacher. And in fact, you were teaching before this, right? So,
No, I'm a
under
student. I'm
your
doing my
Harvard course.
master's.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm working towards my master's in histories.
excellent. Well, super. Let's talk a little bit about that history. And you started to touch on it about how far back the trust industry goes and what are some of the traditions. So give us the lay of the land as we get into some more of the detail about the modernity a little bit later.
Yeah, so the whole sense of the trustee industry really started about duty and care on the trust assets. So everyone needs to remember a trust is a legal thing, it's a person. And the people who have care on that person, a trust, the entity, have a responsibility that goes above and beyond what most people think because the trustee controls everything. They control how the money's invested, how taxes get paid, what taxes get paid, following IRS tax rules, making sure the distributions are done correctly. And as you really well put in, the sole interest rule, which means a trustee cannot put themselves before anybody else as who are a beneficiary of the trust. So it means you can never buy a home that you live in as the trustee as an investment for the trust. Like that's egregious, but it
Mm.
happens all day long. So the purpose of a trust is to distribute money around what the people who created the trust wanted. And so this really talks about the philosophy of money and family.
Did I hear you correctly, Christopher, that you ought not purchase a home for the value that's in the trust or with the value that's in the trust?
No, no, no. It means that if someone uses an individual trustee and that
Okay.
individual trustee says, and it's a family friend, right? Like let's say, Jason, you're the beneficiary and I'm the family friend trustee.
Right.
I cannot buy a home that I live in as an investment for the trust that I'm the trustee of for you.
Got it.
You don't live in the home, I live in it, but I
Right.
consider it an investment. That's what's not allowed.
Okay, got
Well,
it.
yeah, it goes it goes against the intent.
And so you had mentioned how far back in on the previous slide when we were talking about your bio, how far back the industry goes. And could you talk a little bit more about the traditions of sort of the corporate trust industry?
So the traditions really started is when the Crusaders came back after the Second Crusades. This concept of trustee was brought back with Islamic law around the fiduciary responsibility. And what happened was people weren't following the rules. And so there was a series of court cases in the 13th century that set the stage for what are the fiduciary rules of a trustee. So the traditions go back to that time period from the 13th century court cases, and then it extended into modern days, which is where we are today. Corporate trustees really started picking up around the 14th, 15th century, as you saw the Renaissance period take off, Age of Enlightenment, with Elizabeth I and all that sort of thing. So anyways, but where we are today in America, a corporate trustee or a trust company, their job is to do four things: onboard a trust, invest the money, distribute the money, and do tax returns. That's their job. And the most complicated part is really distributing money and investing the money. And then how you do that in a systematic, fair way is the art of being a trustee. And it's an art.
And it's an art. Okay, I want to hear more about that, and I think that people watching definitely want to hear more about that. Spend just a few seconds on the sole interest rule. It reminds me, of course, of the fiduciary rule that's been in and out of favor in our industry, in the financial industry. It sounds like it's even more set in stone in the trust industry.
And that's because the trustee, corporate or individual, has more power than anyone else, more power than a financial advisor, because we can do anything we want. We can set up bank accounts, we can move money, we can decide to make changes to the trust within certain limitations. So we have more power than anyone else. The sole interest rule means that it prohibits the trustee from placing himself in a position where he has a personal interest or it conflicts with the interests of the beneficiary. That's the sole interest rule. So the interest of the beneficiary comes before anybody else. And that's the most important thing.
No, we love that.
Yeah. And the challenge with using individual trustees is really most people want them to provide context around distributions, right? Because there's a lot of history around that. So where we see it working well is where an individual trustee is acting with a corporate trustee, providing context around the family situations and the history of what maybe the grantor or the person who set up the trust wanted or intended. So it's all contextual.
And when we say individual trustee, it sounds so formal, but basically that could be your brother. It could be, whomever, your friend, like you mentioned, people
Mhm.
that you wrote into your trust documents to say this person is gonna, basically take care of this.
Correct. And I'm separating, again, going back to the example, Jason, you're the beneficiary.
Hmm.
I'm a friend of your father, let's say. So I
Right.
would be the trustee. It's not you being the trustee of your own trust.
No.
It's some other individual being the trustee of a trust. And I will tell you the worst person to name as an individual trustee is someone who has PhDs from NASA
Okay.
because they think they know everything,
Sure.
or a doctor making them the trustee because they think they know everything. They're paid to know. The best person to be the family trustee is someone who is fair, impartial, but has the vulnerability and strength to say, I don't know, and raise their hand and go pay money to figure out what are the rules. And so men historically make very bad individual trustees, just like they don't like going to the doctor. So impartiality and the willingness to say, I don't know, I'm going to spend money with a lawyer to understand what are the rules. That is the most important thing.
I'll just repeat that. The best person to be the family trustee, fair, impartial, vulnerable, enough to get the
Well,
right answers, right?
yeah.
No, that's great. And you had mentioned, and I'm reading those four bullet points that you shared with us, the responsibilities of the trustee typically onboard the trust, invest the money, distribute the money, tax returns. Can you talk about in this next bullet point that traditional process of doing those things when whomever is working on it?
So onboarding a trust is when someone's taking on the new responsibility, and there could be title changes to accounts, amending documents, all those sort of things. I mean, I'm making it very simple. You want that process to be measurable and accountable. It's not like, well, it'll take a while. No, you want to know on average how long it should take. So you're constantly improving that process. If you're using a trustee that doesn't understand the word accountability and measurability, yeah, they're a bad choice. And I don't care whether it's corporate or family. So that's on board. Distributions is the hardest thing, and it really should be tied not so much to a budget, but to a long-term financial plan tied to the legal language inside the trust document. What was the grantor's intent about how the money should be used by the beneficiaries? Really, really important. The investments that language inside of trust documents is so generic, you could drive 1,000 Mack trucks through that lane. Lawyers very seldom are very, very specific because you have to consider these documents could last for 150 years, right? So if you think about it, 40 years ago, ETFs didn't exist. So they've got to think about things that might not exist today that could exist in the future. And so that's why it's so wide in terms of the investment options. So to be fair, taxes are pretty straightforward, but do remember, corporate trustees do not do tax planning, meaning they don't look at what gains should be realized or not realized. How does it affect the individual beneficiaries 1040? So really, if at all possible, this is the way we do it. We want the same CPA doing the beneficiaries 1040 that also does the 1041.
Very helpful. You know, what's interesting about this is so many people have experience putting together a trust. Not everyone, but a lot of people who are working with wealth advisors do. But until something happens within your family, you've never had the opportunity to have to execute upon the trust. And that's why what you're sharing is so valuable.
Yeah, I would say the most important part is asking some really key questions for families. What's their definition of a trust fund kid? I don't know.
What's their definition of a trust fund kid?
Yeah. I mean, it could range from if you go bankrupt, we're not helping you, or we'll bail you out no matter what. But again, there is no right or wrong answer. Just be honest in the answer that you want for your family. Another question could be around how do you avoid sibling rivalry with inherited wealth? How does that get solved inside of a trust? So these are things that should be discussed. They're philosophical, but they're embraced inside of the distribution section. So there's all the tax planning and complicated wealth transfer planning that happens in a trust, but then there's the emotional.
Christopher, in reading your paper, I was struck by the difference between a directed trust and a delegated trust. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the simplest version is a directed trust is about 30% cheaper than the delegated trust.
Okay.
Because a directed trust, us as the corporate trustee, do not have investment risk on what a third-party investment advisor has. A delegated trust is where the trust document allows us to delegate that power to a third party. So then we have still some responsibility of review. That's the easiest difference.
So as an example, then, Wealth Advisors Trust Company, you don't manage assets. Would you say that the work that you do would be directed or delegated?
So I would right now about 65% of our trusts are directed. The rest are delegated for a whole bunch of reasons. We always like to make the change from delegated to directed, saves clients money and has less risk for us. And in South Dakota, you can do that. In certain states like Florida and Texas, for example, they have directed trust. This is going to come across, this is a loaded term, but it's a fake directed trust. Sorry,
okay.
I don't mean to be political, but the reason why I say it's fake is because inside the trust legislation, it says that the trustee still has a problem if there's gross negligence or malfeasance on who is managing the money. And in a pure directed trust, that line does not exist. If a third-party investment advisor made a mistake with investing money, the corporate trustee has no liability.
Which is what makes it cheaper.
Which is what makes it cheaper. So, yeah.
So that's the directed trust, cheaper. Correct. Because you remove liability from the trust administrator because the advisor is still managing money.
Yeah. Look, everything about a trustee is risk and time. That's it.
Terrific. Oh, thank you. And thank you for explaining the next
It's that
bullet,
simple.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Independent trustees, tell us how, instead of hiring, my father's friend, let's say, or my sister's cousin, How do independent trust companies help to make sort of the generational plans consistent and maybe just a lot easier?
So remember I talked about risk and time?
Yes.
Time is everything. So if you think of any service industry or even a factory, it's really supply chain management. And so there's a series of steps to deliver anything. So if it's Amazon, book comes into the warehouse, the book comes out. You've got people working in the warehouse and you and I buying stuff on the internet. And that experience is supply chain management. Trust administration, no different. So really what you need to think about when you are working or delivering trustee services, there's manual tasks and there's creative tasks. And you want creative problem solving done in the distribution and working with advisors in an innovative, collaborative way, or the tax advisors or legal advisors, and the manual tasks to be done using automated workflows. However, that's done. And so you really want corporate trustees or even a family trustee to always be thinking, why are we doing it this way? How can we do it more responsive with less risk, taking into account the legal framework within the trust document, the grantor's intent? So you have to remember, decisions are being made upon words. It's not like a physicist making decisions on laws and math. This is based upon words. And so you're interpreting these words. So if you created a trust, Jason, and we're the trustee, we have to interpret your intent. So this is why the distribution section is so important.
Think of trust and administration as supply chain management. Okay, we're learning here. This is helpful.
Well, yeah, because then you separate, where am I really adding value? If I handed you a bill to do a fax, do you want to pay for that bill? Is there a way to automate that process? I mean,
Right.
I'm making an innocuous example, but the concept is corporate trustees need to understand what's their greatest value. And it's not making a big deal about, we have a really pretty trust statement. That's not really adding value. Adding value is interpreting the grantor's intent around what the beneficiary should receive, why, how, when, and all that sort of thing. That's where time should be spent.
Yeah, adding value probably isn't also being party to a huge bank that people are going to have to walk through that after the worst time in their life and then throughout for the ongoing future as well.
Well, to be fair to them, if they looked at it as being accountable and measurable in everything they do, I think they would do a great job, but they just don't hire people like that. I mean, that's why we win business away from them all the time. It's kind of sad, actually. If they were accountable and measurable, we wouldn't exist.
Well, that happens. That happens. Offering your best service as an independent typically is something that, well, we do that too. So we get it. You mentioned modern, and it sounds like Wealth Advisors, Trust Company, and others akin to your firm are essentially modern from an industry that started in the 13th century. Tell us a little bit as we come to a close here about the future innovations that you're seeing, that you're participating in now, and that you're seeing in the future for trust administration.
Do you remember we talked about manual tasks and creative tasks?
Yes.
It's really emphasizing that separation between what a trustee is supposed to do between those two. And it's really hiring people, training people who are creative problem solvers and who are rewarded and embraced for that. It's also making sure trust officers don't have any sales goals, because what they're doing is a craft. Like, I mean, it is a craft of all crafts, no different than being a plumber is a craft or an electrician. So where we're going is separating that between manual and creative, in my opinion, and then keep reinventing using the question, why are we doing it this way? right? Onboarding, distributions, taxes, investments. We don't do the investments, but out of those three things, always asking yourself every 2 years, knowing what we know today, if we're starting from scratch today, what would we do different? And it's that mechanical discipline of looking at everything with fresh eyes every couple of years is critical for the future.
No, thank you for that, Christopher. I mean, one of the things I appreciate about what firms like yours do is you allow the advisors to remain advisors with the family long into the future, despite what may happen to the principals and what will happen in the future with the heirs. And so it's just really helpful to maintain that continuity, maintain the creativity, maintain the mission, the standards, everything that the family put together. Well, everyone brace yourselves. I'm going to stop the share. So big faces are coming. And as we come to our final moments in our education today from Mr. Christopher Holtby, Christopher, can you give us maybe one tangible to take away, considering that people watching this have either been thinking about putting together their estate plans or have already put together their estate plans, likely some trusts, and now have something to think about? What should they maybe go to their estate planner and discuss with them?
And the most important thing is, what is the philosophy of my money and my family? That's it. That is the takeaway. And from there, all sorts of questions. You don't have to go to an attorney. You can use your financial advisor around that and then take those answers to the estate attorney. So that's my big takeaway. And as an advisor-friendly trust company, we work collaboratively with, advisors like you, Jason, or Doug here. I can see he has a CFP. So, but to your question, the philosophy of money and family. And one of my partners came up with that, actually, one of my business partners.
We'll have to meet one of those guys sometimes. What is the philosophy of money and my family? Family governance is something that we appreciate. So that's a great line for us to underscore. Mr. Christopher Holtby, co-founder of Wealth Advisors Trust Company, thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you so much, Jason.
And with that, I yield the balance of your time.
All right. Bye-bye.